This week's Parsha is Shmini, the third Parsha in Vayikra, which is the third book of the Torah. First, I would like to begin by mentioning the nifty factoid that after this Shabbos, over the course of around the past 3 weeks, we will now have read from Shmini a whopping 8 times, which humorously matches the meaning of the name of this week's Parsha, Shmini, 8. Moving on. In this week's portion, I would like to focus on the notion of leadership and certain crucial virtues among authority figures. In this Parsha, after lengthy and arduous work, the Israelites completed the Mishkan, the sanctuary. It should have been a day of utter joy. For 7 days, Moshe had arranged preparations for its consecration. Now, on the 8th day, the first day of Nisan, 1 year to the day, commemorating the Israelites' reception of their first ever command from God, which was 2 weeks prior to their exodus from Egypt. Now, on this 8th day, the service of the sanctuary was ready to begin. Our sages add that in heaven on this day, it was the most joyous day since creation. However, swiftly and without delay, tragedy struck. As the first pasuk of Vayikra Perek Yud, the 10th chapter reads, the 2 elder sons of Aaron offered a strange fire that had not been commanded, and the fire from heaven that should have consumed the sacrifices consumed them as well. They died. Aaron's joy turned to mourning. Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent. The man who had valiantly been Moshe's unwavering spokesman through some of Israel's most daunting tasks, now could no longer speak. Words turned to ash in his mouth. This episode is teeming with that which is rather difficult to comprehend. Much seems to be related to the concept of holiness and the powerful energies it released, which, like nuclear power today, could be deadly dangerous if not properly used. Yet, in this incident lies a more human tale regarding 2 alternative approaches to leadership, which still resonates with us today. First, there is the story about Aaron. In this week's Parsha, we read about how Moshe instructed him to commence his function as high priest. Moshe then said to Aaron, approach the altar, and prepare your sin offering and burnt offering, thus atoning for you and the people. Then prepare the people's offering to atone for them, as God has commanded. Our sages detected a particular nuance in Moshe's instructive words, approach the altar, suggesting a scenario where Aaron was actually standing at a distance from the altar, reluctant to draw close. Our sages comment, initially Aaron was ashamed to come close. Moshe said to him, do not be ashamed. This is what you have been chosen to do. Why was Aaron ashamed? Tradition has provided 2 explanations, both brought by Nachmanides in his masterful commentary on the Torah. The first understanding of Aaron's actions is that trepidation at the thought of coming so close to the divine presence simply overwhelmed him. The rabbis likened this interpretation to the bride of a king, nervous at entering the bridal chamber for the first time. The second explanation is that Aaron, seeing the horns of the altar, was reminded of the golden calf, his great sin. How could Aaron, who had played a chief role in that horrendous event, now undertake the responsibility of atoning for the people's sins? Such a function surely demanded an innocence Aaron no longer maintained. Therefore, it was necessary for Moshe to remind him that it was precisely to atone for sins that the altar had been constructed, and that the fact that he had been chosen by God to be high priest was an unequivocal sign that he had been forgiven. There is, perhaps, a third, albeit less spiritual, explanation. Until now, in all respects, Aaron had been second to Moshe. Yes, Aaron consistently appeared by Moshe's side throughout, helping him speak and lead. However, there is a vast psychological difference between being second in command and being a leader in your own right. We probably all know some examples of people who quite readily serve in an assisting capacity, but are sometimes terrified at the prospect of leading on their own. Whichever explanation for why Aaron stood at a distance is true, perhaps they are all true, still, Aaron was reticent concerning taking on his new role, and Moshe had to give him confidence, saying, "This is what you have been chosen for." That is the first story, the story of Aaron. The other story is the dolefully tragic one of Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Avihu, who offered a strange fire that had not been commanded. The sages offer several readings of this event, all based on close understanding of the various places in the Torah which refer to those sons' deaths. Some contend Nadav and Avihu had been drinking alcohol. Others postulate they were arrogant, holding themselves up above the rest of the community, which is why they had never married. Some believe they were guilty of dictating a halakhic ruling on their own about the use of man-made fire, instead of asking their teacher Moshe whether it was permitted. Others argue they were restless in the presence of Moshe and Aharon. According to a Gemara in Sanhedrin, Nadav and Avihu had said, "When will these two old men die, and we can lead the congregation?" Regardless of which reading of the episode we subscribe to, it is quite patent that Nadav and Avihu were all too eager to exercise leadership. Carried away by their enthusiasm to play a part in the inauguration, they performed a ritual they had not been commanded to perform. But did Moshe not do something entirely on his own initiative? Namely, breaking the tablets when he came down the mountain and saw the golden calf? If Moshe could act spontaneously, why not Nadav and Avihu? The answer is as follows. For them, the line between a priest and a prophet had become blurry. Nadav and Avihu failed entirely to comprehend that different types of leadership exist and that they are not interchangeable. What is appropriate to one branch of the authority may be completely inappropriate to another. A judge is not a politician. A king is not a prime minister. A religious leader is not a celebrity seeking popularity. Confuse these roles, and not only will you fall, we learn that you will also damage the very office you were chosen to hold. The real contrast here, though, is the difference between Aaron and his two sons. Aaron, it appears, is the exact antipodes of his two sons. Aaron was overcautious and had to be persuaded by Moshe even to begin. Nadav and Avihu were not cautious enough. So keen were they to put their own stamp on the role of priesthood that their impetuosity was actually their downfall. These are perennially the two challenges leaders must overcome. The first is the reluctance to lead, asking, why me? Why should I get involved? Why should I undertake the responsibility and all that comes with it? The stress, the hard work, and the criticisms leaders always have to face. Besides, there are other people better qualified and more suited than I am. Even the greatest were reluctant to lead. Moshe at the burning bush found reason after reason to display that he was not the man for the job. Isaiah and Yirmiyahu both felt inadequate, summoned to lead. Yonah actually ran away. The challenge really is genuinely daunting. But when you feel as if you are being called to a task, if you know that the mission is necessary and important, then there is nothing that you can do but utter, Hineni, here I am. In the words of Susan Jeffers' famous book title, you have to feel the fear and do it anyway. The other challenge is the opposite. There are some people who simply see themselves as nothing other than leaders. They are convinced that they can do it better. We recall the famous remark of Israel's first prime minister, Chaim Weizmann, that he was the head of a nation of 1,000,000 presidents. From a distance, it seems so easy. Isn't it obvious that the leader should do X and not Y? Our species consists of many backseat drivers who know better than those whose hands are actually on the wheel. Put those sapient backseat advisors in a position of leadership, and they can do great damage. Never having sat in the driver's seat, they can in no way imagine how many considerations have to be taken into account, how many voices of opposition have to be overcome, how challenging it is to cope with the pressures of events, while at the same time not to lose sight of the long-term ideals and objectives. The late John F. Kennedy remarked that the worst shock after being elected president was that when we got to the White House, we discovered that things were as bad as we said they were. Nothing prepares you for the pressure of leadership when the stakes are high. Overenthusiastic and overconfident leaders can do tremendous harm. Before those leaders became the leaders they were, they understood events only through their own perspective. What they did not apprehend is that leadership involves relating to numerous perspectives, to plentiful interest groups, and to myriad points of view. This does not mean that you should try and satisfy everyone. In 99 out of 100 cases, those who try to do so end up satisfying no one. But you do have to consult and persuade. Sometimes you need to honor precedent and the tradition of a particular institution. You have to know exactly when to behave as your predecessors did, and when not to. Such requires considered judgment, not blind enthusiasm in the heat of the moment. Nadav and Avihu were surely great people. The germ of their demise was that they believed they were those great people. They were not like their father, Aaron, who had to be persuaded to come close to the altar due to his sense of inadequacy. The key feature that Nadav and Avihu lacked was in fact an awareness of their own inadequacy. To accomplish something truly superb as well as laudable, we must be conscious of these two temptations. One temptation is the fear of greatness. Who am I? The other is being convinced of your own greatness. Who are they? I can do better. We can only do great things if A, the task matters more than the person. If B, we are willing to do our best without thinking that we are superior than others. And C, if we are willing to take advice, the virtue Nadav and Avihu failed to appreciate. People do not become leaders because they are great. They become great because they are willing to serve as leaders. As we have learned from the Parsha, it does not matter that we think ourselves to be inadequate. So did Moshe. So did Aaron. What matters is the willingness, when challenge calls, to say, Hineni, here I am. Shabbat Shalom.